So you also lease the shops at El Paseo and been doing that for quite a while. When did you start on that project?
We started pre-pandemic, just right before the pandemic in 2019. Family owned about 6 buildings on the street. They're the largest owner of property on the street other than Simon Taubman, who owns the gardens. And we put together a merchandising plan to really replace some old tired brands that were non-productive and bring in more relevant brands that were more productive. And it's been a several year process. We've kind of stuck to the plan and it's really turning great. We did the restaurants first to drive the traffic, actually replaced 2 dying luxury retailers with restaurants that are driving way more footsteps and way more productivity at this point.
Hi, I'm Brett Robinson. I'm here with Bob Baker from BMW Realty. He's our featured broker in Palm Desert. Look forward to talking to him about all the trends that are going on in that market and how the street has changed over the years. Hey, Bob.
How you doing, Brett?
Good. So what makes this street so interesting?
It sits in Palm Desert on El Paseo, sits in the heart of the money. It's the most centrally located walkable street with restaurants, retail, services, and great parking that really exist in the most of the Coachella Valley.
What's the market doing right now? What are vacancies and rents? What direction is that headed in?
Vacancies are really at a historic low, and obviously that's driving rents a little bit. The dynamics of the street are 6 blocks long, different ownership. The rents can vary quite a bit with you've got old families that own buildings as opposed to bigger, more institutional owners.
Right. And if you're a brand coming into the market, where should you kind of expect rents to be?
On a monthly basis, probably 350 to 450 a square foot, with triple nets really having a wide variance, but let's say 18 to as high as 25. And there's obviously individual buildings that might be a little bit lower that are owned by old family trusts.
Right. So somewhere mid 50s gross is somewhere.
That would be fair to say.
Right. So why is the market at a historic low, you think? What's driving that?
I think post-COVID, people saw the increased population continue to grow. Population growth is real strong in the Coachella Valley. It's only 2 hours from Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego. So you get a lot of kind of weekenders that come out there and extended weekenders that ended up moving out there and staying out there.
So how has that customer profile changed since COVID?
Post-COVID, I think you're seeing a younger audience out there. Younger meaning it used to be pre-retirees, 50, 45, 50 and over. And
Right.
now you're seeing young families moving out there because of remote work, a tremendous amount of growth out there.
Brands come into the market. What's the one thing they ought to think about that make sure they don't get wrong about the Palm Desert market? Is it don't assume that old perception still is correct?
Yeah, I think both on the demographics as far as age, the incomes are great out there and disposable income is huge. When people just come out there for long weekends, they're spending more money, they're more relaxed. I think the age is coming down, the density is going up. And then because it is a seasonal market, it is in the summer, you have the lowest population there. We've got tracking of retail sales that the dip is much lower than it's been historically over the last 10 years. So there's not as big a dip in the summer, which shows more long full-time residents there.
So what's the energy like on the street right now?
So we're just hitting prime season. November through end of May is kind of the prime 6 months. And then there's a shoulder on each end of those of a couple months. So, daytime, very busy, breakfast, lunch, dinner, people eating out. There's a lot of restaurants scattered about the streets, which drives a lot of the traffic. And then a lot of new retailers have been coming in over the last few years. And this is when they traditionally try to open. Their season is, primarily October through May is the strongest season.
So what kind of impact is RH going to have when they open on the street?
Well, interestingly, they're going to have 3 locations on the street. They took over a space on the eastern end of the street and turned it into a design studio, which was the first time they've done it, separated out of the quote mansions. On the other end of the block, they're opening an 11,000 foot, right size for the market, retail store. They have another building where they plan to do RH outdoor. So they're going to have 3 different locations on the street. So knowing the customer that it goes after and targets, it's great for the street.
Has your leasing activity increased as people have gotten wind of RH's opening? Do you think it has had an impact on the number of phone calls you're getting?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of retailers that have signed on the street, some of which haven't opened and have opened over the last 6 months, 8 months. And I think that's where you're seeing increased energy. I mean, we've got Viore open and Rio, they opened as a permanent store and then expanded almost right away during the first summer they were open, doing tremendous business. I think they refer to it as a resort store, but it's doing the volumes of many other stores. We brought in a Shake Shack, which is the first kind of quick service on the street. Most of the restaurants are sit down table service. I thought there was a need for the right brand to come in and that people recognize from around the country, and that it brought in a little bit more of the quick service, but high quality for sure.
So you also lease the shops at El Paseo and been doing that for quite a while. When did you start on that project?
We started just right before the pandemic in 2019 and put together a merchandising plan. A family owned about 6 buildings on the street. They're the largest owner of property on the street, other than Simon Taubman, who owns the gardens. And we put together a merchandising plan to really replace some old, tired brands that were non productive and bring in more relevant brands that were more productive. And it's been a several year process. We've kind of stuck to the plan and it's really turning great. We did the restaurants first to drive the traffic, actually replaced 2 dying luxury retailers with restaurants that are driving way more footsteps and way more productivity at this point.
So the pandemic was good to the shops at El Paseo in a way.
Yeah, I think in general, the Palm Desert, and especially El Paseo, where it sits really in the heart of most of the money, you can even just look at the residential pricing. And the closer you are to El Paseo, the better, because people want to be close to that shopping and dining as opposed to just jumping in their cars. But yeah, more people moved out here full time. They came out for the pandemic just to get away from their other home in LA, a more denser area, and they discovered, oh, this is great. I mean, it's beautiful out there most of the time, and they get most of the services and needs serviced right there in their backyard.
Why did you decide to become a featured broker on Brand March?
I felt the unique thing that Brand Marsh offered was they were really going after the specialty brokers that I knew and that even you knew in the business for so many years. And we didn't have a way to network with each other than the usual referral business. And to have a one place where similar type projects could be marketed, I felt it was positive. In fact, when we joined, I think we saw directly or indirectly an increase in leasing activity. And sometimes you just need the exposure. And I thought it was important.